Antonia, how are you?
Hi, I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. I'm Cortland, Jacoby with Punch Drunk Critics, and I am here with Antonia Campbell-Hughes, star and co-writer of Cordelia, the psychological horror film about a woman dealing with one tragedy and having to deal with the horror of another. Cordelia, I almost called you Cordelia. Sorry, Antonia. Uh, First off, how are you this morning?
How am I? I'm well. It's my afternoon, sort of. I'm in London at the moment. Um,
Nice.
yeah, I'm well, thanks. Yeah, it's nice. It's like summertime almost. People are out in the world again, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's nice. So like I said before, you co-wrote this film with director Adrian Shergold. And in
Yeah.
fact, you had a large impact on Johnny Flynn's character, Frank. Talk to me a little bit about writing this film. I know you guys didn't like write it side by side. It was more of he had a past and then you had a past.
Yeah, so I had worked with Adrian. I was in a BBC like period TV show type thing, you know, and Adrian was a director, and so that's how I initially met him. And then he, in that time, we kind of, it was just a working relationship. And at the end of the shoot, he sort of took me aside and said, "Can I show you something?" And he had known my work as an actor as well. Like, he was very much had a long, very respected career in British television, and he'd made some great films, but they're before, I suppose, and usually BBC films. And my area was kind of like European independent film. And I think he always had this script that he felt was well placed in a European independent film arena. And so he sent it to me. We talked about it for a bit. And so he'd originally written it maybe 10 years before or something, I think. And what was really interesting to me about it was he said, if I play this role, it would need a pass, like an infusion of like a female tonality. Like it was very much his world. And it was written, it was almost like quite stream of consciousness. It was like this big, thick, heavy script. It was like 300 pages. There's so many characters. So it needed to be sort of pared down. And I've been writing film, screenplays for a long time. And so, yeah, it was kind of, that's why I think it's very much, it was like a marriage of two, because what I had to do was look at, the character, but also she's sort of in Adrian's time warp. It's his memories, it's his experiences, which is very interesting for a man of an older generation
Right.
to actually write himself almost like as a female protagonist.
In the press notes, he said he had been thinking about this since 2007, and he was thinking of
Mhm.
Sally Hawkins in the role. What a great like comparison, I feel like, for you. Like what a great honor to be
Yeah, well, I knew Sally. I know Sally, so that was great, you know. And Adrian knew that as well, so it wasn't like a huge leaping,
right.
whatever the expression is. And it's hard to not then have that color what you do.
Mhm.
But I thought what was really interesting was again, what a lot of actors don't know is what happens behind the scenes. And the fact is, for most films, the casting changes so often. So actually, if most actors knew who was in line before them, it would probably, but you just have to take, when the role is yours, it's yours, is what I really feel. And but what I thought was interesting about Cordelia is there's sort of this metamorphosis that she goes through. And I felt that I was performing, she is performing in the first half. She's kind of playing this very sort of quite mildly spoken mouse-like diminutive character. And that's a performance to exist in the world. And her metamorphosis becomes like what she really is inside. So I was quite interested in Sally's own mannerisms.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Um, you also play Cordelia's sister, Caroline. I've always been fascinated technically, like by that, by like an actor playing this two two different parts in the same scene.
Yeah.
How did you and Adrian kind of go about that? I know that like each film production does that differently.
You mean in terms of performance or technically?
In terms of performance, I mean, did you do both scenes on the same day? Did you go back to it, like, you know, or both parts of it?
Well, no, we did like Caroline days, as far as I remember. Yes. I think it depended on the scene because we shot in this extraordinary set build. And the way to shoot it was, it was all very technical with the camera and, not crossing the line. And there was a lot of work into trying to figure out how that would work technically. And so some scenes, my request was, could we do Caroline sections like in days? Because as a performance, it's quite hard to switch, in the day. Or, because I've been interested in other actors who played twins and how they shot it. Mark Ruffalo did it amazingly in that show. This much I know is true.
Yeah.
But I think they took a big time frame. I think they came back to it like several months later because he went through like a weight change and all that stuff. I had to do some scenes on the day where I like went away and had to do a full like look change. And that's tricky. It's not ideally how you do it, but I think what's interesting about, I think that making a film, every department is as important as the next, and it shouldn't all be like allow the actor the privilege to monopolize time. Yeah, so it's pretty tricky, but we did lots of rehearsal and we I think that, I kept trying to find how to make, because I'm one individual,
right,
how to make the differences so pronounced, but actually twins are quite similar. Like what you actually have to do is find the similarities, and make it very subtle.
Absolutely. So Johnny Flynn's character plays a cellist, and throughout the film you have these like Hitchcockian string elements to the soundtrack. Was that something that both you and Adrian talked about? Was that in the script? Was that something that you like figured out in post? I mean, I know that you weren't directing it, but still.
No, that's very much Adrian's thing, to be honest. He was that was his area, I'd say 100%. And also, I think he collaborated with Johnny on it quite a bit. I know that Johnny, I think he worked with a guy who he always works with, and they composed together some of those pieces that he plays. Obviously, Johnny's a musician, so that was really important to him.
Awesome. Cordelia was filmed well before the pandemic, but the themes of like isolation and paranoia definitely hit much harder as a viewer in 2022. Talk to me about how you see the film now versus then. I'm sure it's changed a little bit.
Not really, to be honest. I mean, I thought it was much more relevant pre-pandemic. A lot of people, I know that people have connected with it in what we've all gone through in the pandemic, but that's a shared experience. What I think was very interesting for the film is that it's a unique experience that we don't know. So maybe what it is now is people will be more sympathetic, potentially, because what had always interested me, like when I was much younger, like as a teenager, I lived in New York, and cities where people literally live on top of each other, buildings where there's so many dwellings, like Tokyo and parts of China and London, of course, where people cohabit and there's only a thin wall between them, but they don't interact or engage at all. And that prism, that paralysis of isolation, and there's no way to seem to connect to one another, And I've always found that really, really interesting about how that happens in capital cities. And yeah, I suppose that it happened to a lot of people during the pandemic for such a sustained amount of time. But maybe what happened as well is that it was a shared experience in the pandemic and people became much more educated as what was happening.
Since Cordelia wrapped, you have written It Is in Us All, which also happens to be your directorial debut. What was something you took from Cordelia and used in that production?
That's an interesting question. No, I like it because it's making me really think. Gosh.
Is there anything you learned from Adrian as either a writer or a director?
Well, it's interesting because I think one thing that strikes me is that because I had worked with Adrian for quite a while, and we talked about the pre-production and the script and all that stuff. When it came to shooting, he was very strict about that part is finished and you are now an actor and I'm the director. And I had to, like, that was quite jarring to me, but I really respected it, and it was a very good process for me. Whereas, so in my film, I was very much in director head, and you have to really steer the ship. And I have a small role in my own film, and that was tricky, because I very much learnt the principle, to be quite disciplined about what your role is if if you have several hats on a production. And what I learned on Cordelia, which was to step back and allow to be an actor, I then had to deal with on my own production, and that was quite difficult to step into, like being a director, being an actor. But our films are so different; it's quite hard to.
Yeah, they look like it.
Yeah, they're very different. I mean, the thing is, I've been an actor for 18 years, and I've always known that when you step on someone's set, you respect and you honor the director's vision, and your job as an actor is to try and facilitate that as much as possible. My film is completely my film. It's my voice and my vision entirely. Whereas Cordelia, it was kind of collaborating with somebody else for their vision. And I'm an actor in it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me, Antonia. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for asking such interesting questions.
Thanks for checking out the show. If you like what we're laying down, please subscribe to our channel and click the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest stuff.